There is a supernatural world that surrounds us. Sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. You'll hear stories about this, so much more, right here on Supernatural Confrontations. I have a very special guest. I am honored to have Josh Peck here in the house today. And we're just going to kind of free fall it because, you know, we've both been traveling and all this stuff for decades. And we'll get into that. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Folks, you're feeling unsure about your finances these days. Well, you're not alone. That's why Noble Gold Investments is here to help. Just hear it straight from the folks that they've helped. The Noble crew walk me through everything, no stress. With Noble Gold's help, I can finally sleep easy at night. And now this month, Noble Gold Investments is handing out a free 5-ounce silver American the Beautiful coin if you qualify for an IRA. Invest in gold and silver with Noble Gold Investments. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com now. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Folks, remember, we've invested with them, and I am really glad we did. But number to call, 877-646-5347. Once again, that's 877-646-5347. We invested with them, and I'm glad we did, especially when we look at the trillions of dollars that the United States is in debt. If it collapses, you and I both will be glad we put some of our money into gold or silver. Josh, thanks so much for coming on the record. It's an honor to have you here, sir.
Honor's all mine. Thanks for inviting me. It's always good to talk with you. How have you been?
You know, I'm okay. We're doing pre-records on this. This will be aired when I'm in Israel, so I don't have to, you know, with all the time change and all this other stuff. So we'll probably do 2 shows. I don't know. We'll see what we have time for, but I'm sure we can get at least 2. And I just, you know, thank you for coming on. You're a great researcher. You've authored how many books now?
Oh, I've lost count. I have 9 or 10 at this
point. It's quite a corpus of work there. And you're also a filmmaker.
Yeah, 3 movies. Well, 4 technically. No, actually, it might be 5. I lost count of that one too.
There you go. And you edited. You put the final edit on our last film, Out of Place Artifacts, and I just want to thank you. You know, as an editor, you get into this stuff and you watch it for so long, and it gets to the point where I can't do this anymore. I can't watch it one more time. I'm going to scream if I have to watch it one more time. And you know, you put the finishing touches on Out of Place Artifacts, and I thank you for that. You did a great job.
Oh, well, I really appreciate it. It was an honor for me. And and I totally get it as an editor myself. I mean, there comes a point where you need a fresh set of eyes on it, and it just helps elevate the project even more. So I was happy to do it. I'm excited about that. I'm going to have you on my show sometime to promote that and some of your other stuff as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So my first question to you is, all this stuff came out a while back, not that far back, with the Mexican mummies. And, you know, on one hand, you've got David Grush appearing before a congressional hearing, under oath, the whole deal, saying, we've got biologics. They're not showing us any pictures, but that's what he's saying. And then you've got the clown show, with all due respect, you know, to those involved in it. We've got, you know, here are these little alien mummies, blah, 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 found in Mexico. I'm not buying that for a New York minute. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was joking around with my wife, Christina, and I said, you know, I think what's funny to me is that these alien mummies are going to be more remembered, like Epstein. These mummies are going to be more remembered for their hilarious Facebook memes than anything meaningful that they actually brought into the world. So, no, I agree with you. I mean, of course, there's some strange stuff, and it could, you know, maybe we'll be proven wrong, but I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second. Now, at the same time, with all the Grush stuff, That one, I'm not so sure. It seems like Grush at least believes it.
Yeah.
But he's in a position where he's being told things. So we're not sure if he's actually seen anything himself or if this is just stuff that he's been told. And there's obviously a lot of stuff that he can't say. But there have been other people, very credible witnesses that have come forth to speak to Congress as well. So I believe there is a very real thing here. I just think the alien mummies have nothing to do with that.
And I concur. Let's move into, Grush talks about we have biologics. I just love that exchange between Mace and Grush.
Yeah.
Did you retrieve any bodies from these UFOs? Yes. Are they human? No. It's just like, and my phone doesn't ring. It's like, what are you guys waiting for? We need to see pictures. This goes back to the Roswell stuff. We interviewed a man, I don't know, you probably haven't seen the film, but we interviewed this couple, and this will lead into the question. And it was Carolyn Rankin that was end of life caregiver type of deal. And so she was with this guy, Colonel Hill, who was OSS. OSS, of course, is the precursor to CIA, was an intelligence officer in World War II. He was an interrogator in World War II. So this guy, spoke I think he had like 3 degrees and spoke numerous languages, a real smart guy. But it's end of life, and like a month before he passes, he sort of spills the beans to Jim and Carolyn Rankin. And Carolyn asked him, what about Roswell? Was it a weather balloon? And he drops his head, according to Carolyn, like this and lets out a deep sigh. It's like a deathbed confession deal. No, it wasn't a weather balloon. And I realized Roswell's very controversial. But she asked about the bodies, and he said, yeah, he was flown, according to Hill's testimony. And it's secondhand because it's coming from Jim and Carolyn. But, Jim says right on the record yet that he wasn't pulling a prank. He wasn't like pulling their leg, or he was telling the truth. Carolyn swears by it too. I mean, they got to know him for 2 years, and a month after this, he passes away. But apparently there was one alien that was alive, one gray that was alive, and he tried to make communication with that. What are your thoughts when you hear stories like this? What is that as a researcher?
Yeah, Roswell, I'm more inclined to believe because there are certain things that I don't think could have been faked, and how like for what purpose. So for example, that infamous photograph where part of the memo is kind of held out, but I mean this is old cameras from the 40s, so you can't read anything. I don't think there's any way that back then anybody could have predicted that computer technology would become so advanced as it is now that we can zoom in and actually read those words on this official thing that was supposed to be kept secret, and on there you see words like disk. So I mean something happened, and also, just the absurdity of the time compression story. It's like, well, how could it be crash test dummies when crash test dummies weren't even invented until a couple of years later?
Right.
There's that, or and what was the excuse? It was something like, well, we think it's something called time compression. People are just remembering this wrong, and that never made any sense. I think that was from a thing that Congress thing or some kind of announcement that happened in the 90s, I believe. But and that one was even one that gave our good friend, the late Dr. Michael Heiser, pause. I mean, he even said, and we know how like rooted he was, but he even said, when I heard that was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. And so I agree. I don't know exactly what happened with Roswell. I know Dr. Michael Heiser believed that it was something having to do with an actual test, and they used kids with progeria. But to me, but to me, it's like there's so many things that
don't
have to. Yeah, there's too many things that have to fall into place for that interpretation to be right. I mean, it's interesting, but it's almost to the point where it's like, well, it might just be easier if this is just fallen angel stuff, and it was a real crashed, and retrieved object. People didn't know what to make of it, didn't know what it was. And then whatever happened after that, I don't know. Maybe communication was made between the two parties, but I think the parts of the deep state or the government or whatever faction we want to put on the whatever word we want to put on the faction that makes the decisions about these things. Right. I don't even think they really know what they're dealing with. I think they do, but I don't think they're thinking fallen angel stuff like the way that we are. I think they're buying into the lie that this is it can only be aliens from another planet or maybe another dimension, because that's starting to gain some popularity as well. Even Grush in a previous interview alluded to some ideas about that with Newswatch or News Nation or something like that. And I thought that was interesting because I've been noticing for the past few years this interdimensional or extra dimensional idea has been ramping up. It's the interdimensional hypothesis as opposed to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And so I've noticed that that's been ramping up, and that might explain some of it. But again, it's like, what is the origin? Because we would say angels, fallen angels, are interdimensional, extra-dimensional beings. What's weird, though, is that how can they both be extra-dimensional yet have physical bodies? So I do believe that physical bodies were recovered. Well, we know from the book of Jude that there were extra-dimensional beings called angels that left their first estate, they left their home. And when you look into the Greek in that, because it says it twice, when you look into the Greek, one word means their home, and then the other one means their actual body, their tent, their dwelling. So these fallen beings have physical bodies. Isn't it weird how they seem all spindly, like they're in a natural state of decomposition for thousands of years? I mean, they look like mummies walking around already. So all of that to me screams that yes, this is physical. This is a real physical phenomenon. But I believe that the Bible has ultimately the answers for it. It's fallen angel in nature. The demonic world is a part of that too, obviously, when we get into things like Nephilim and all that stuff. And I think that the people who are in charge over this information and not sharing it with the rest of us, I think they're in over their heads and they don't really know what they're dealing with.
And I concur, and that leads me to my next question. It seems like the old guard, and what I mean by that, they had it right. They had a chance to tell us, and they did. Army recovers crash disk. That's the truth. And then 24 hours later, we have the spin doctors taking control. And you mentioned the telegram. In that telegram, recovered disk, bodies flown to Wright. It's not Wright Pat at that time. It's just Wright Field. But that's what's going on. I mean, this is the stuff of legend, and this is exactly what we see in that telegram. And to your point, in 47, no one would have dreamed that they'll never be able to see this thing. He's just being very cavalier with he could care less. He's not, like the coaches at the football games, right? They go like this. They cover their mouth because and the next thing in that, if I could digress for a second, they're going to be able to penetrate the paper and read the mouth anyway. I mean, that's right. That's where it's going. So it's just like, who would have thunk, right? But the bottom line is that telegram recovered disk bodies, right? I mean, there it is. And this was secondhand information that came to us, but Jim and Carolyn Rankin once again talking about the recovered bodies that were there. And one of them was alive, and this guy, Colonel Hill, flew in to try to communicate with it, couldn't communicate with it. And Hill told them that everything was flown to Wright Field, which later becomes Wright-Patterson. So, circling back, the old guard had it right in the beginning, and then they just lied through their teeth, in my opinion, and came up with the canard, which that was it for decades. All of a sudden, 2017... Fox News and then other media, but it broke in the New York Times much earlier than that. I forget the date, but a lot earlier. And that was a nothing burger, no one blinked. But when Commander David Fravor was on Fox News, that's when the story exploded. And that's the first rung, as I call it, on a ladder of disclosure. So all that to say this, the new guard seems to be, because the old guard's dead. Everybody involved in the cover-up, they're all dead. They'd be like in their hundreds. So the new guard is going, we've got to let this out, and they're leaching it out slowly. Speak to that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that's what they're waiting for, because this phenomenon is getting so prevalent it just can't be ignored anymore. I mean, the average person is seeing stuff. I mean, most people believe it's real to some extent. Now, how they interpret that is that depends on the individual, but most people believe that it's real to some extent. So, yeah, you're right. The Pentagon or just the government or whoever has a problem now. I think what they're doing is they're waiting, because if they came out with this 20, 30 years ago, well, now they have to explain why they've been keeping it secret, why they've been potentially even killing people to keep this a secret. I mean, they have all that blood on their hands. They have to explain that. Well, a new guard doesn't really have to, because they could say, well, that was the old guys. That's not us. I mean, it's like when it used to be that psychedelic experiments on people, that the government was doing was a conspiracy theory. But after a while, after a new guard came in, it started becoming public, and the government didn't really have to answer for it because it was like, well, we're sorry, but that's the old guys. That's not us.
That's
So
not
I
us,
think
right.
that, yeah, I think we're seeing that same kind of thing. They know it can't be ignored anymore, so they got to say something. Also, added on to that, you have all these other countries around the world that are releasing stuff left and right. So, I mean, like Mexico, and of course, there is a ton of hoax stuff coming out
Sure.
of Mexico, but there have been some real things from their own government. And I don't know if they're actually UFOs or what, but they've released video footage. Their Air Force has released video footage saying, I don't know what this is, but here it is, and the world has that. Other countries are becoming more open about it. So now we're almost in this kind of race where it's like, well, who's gonna really spill the beans first, and how are we gonna do it? And I think America does want to because whoever spills the beans first is the one who directs the conversation, who directs how this is going to be interpreted. And I think America wants that. We want that for our own, or the government at least. They don't want to let like Russia define this for the rest of the world, and that now they're the ones in the leading charge in this field. America wants that. So I think they're figuring out a way, and I think this is how it's going to play out. I think more and more we're going to get these new guard people. I saw a recent congressional hearing with a Mace that you mentioned earlier. She was saying, it's funny, $1 billion just go out the window, and you guys come in year after year, after decades and decades, and you don't ever have to answer for it. And like, she's really grilling this guy on this, and it's like you didn't really see that much before because they were just allowed to have this black budget thing.
Sure.
Everybody knew what was going on, and they didn't have to answer for it except, well, just booking errors, and okay, well, go on your way then. So we are seeing a shift. That's both good, and that should give people like us and people watching pause, because when this comes out, when it really comes out, and I think that we're in the process of that now, the world is pretty much going to believe what the government says about it. Whatever the government says about it, however they interpret it, that's really it's whatever the media says. The media will take whatever the government says and process it through their filters, then back to the common people. But if the media tells everybody, hey, this is real, it's actually aliens, they're from this other planet, well, now people like me and you and people that are watching, we need to make sure we're really informed on this topic in this field, because we're going to be the only ones that are going to be out there saying, hang on. Now, what proof do we have that this is actually aliens from another planet and not fallen angels, or not modern day Nephilim scenarios, or something like that? Because the things that we're seeing, the whole alien abduction program, what they're doing, we see that in Genesis 6.
Yes.
So it's already like all of the information is laid out for us. So we have to we have to be prepared to provide that answer in face of much ridicule, because we'll get, oh man, you think that we've been ridiculed so far?
Oh,
wait till
it'll be
the government and the
unbelievable.
media actually comes out and says these are aliens. We're going to face ridicule like never before when we come out and say, no, we've been saying this whole time, this is fallen angel demonic stuff. And I'm not even saying that I don't necessarily believe that there could be aliens on another planet. I see that as a wholly separate issue. There could be. I don't think that it affects the gospel at all. I think the things that are interacting with us, because they tie, the same elements are the same elements you see in like demonic possession or demonic encounters. I mean, It's the same kind of thing. It's so close. To me, it's like, well, if demons and fallen angels, if they could deceive people through some kind of alien disguise, why wouldn't they? Why would they not use that? So I think we need, and your viewers, my viewers, we all need to be prepared for what's coming, because I think we're only maybe a couple years away from, and we're already seeing the shift now. There's already people now that are more inclined to believe that aliens are real because of this congressional hearing. And so far, the news media has kind of sort of been cautious about it, but they're actually reporting on it. But they're still kind of withholding their own interpretations. But that dam is going to be released soon, and it's not going to be long till all these news media outlets are going to start really, covering this within the paradigm of these are aliens from another planet. We should hear what they have to say. We should, welcome them in. Let's not be racist towards them too. All this stuff. We can see the groundwork for. So I think that's what we're in for, and it's definitely time to be prepared.
I well said. Thank you. we're running out of time for part one. We're going to do a part two on this.
Sure.
But in UFO Lord, I know you know this. Allegedly, Eisenhower goes missing for 24 or 30 hours, and the toothache story. It's like, I'm not buying that for, a second.
Yeah.
And as it goes, there was this quid pro quo, Holloman Air Force Base. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've wondered about that too. Like, was some sort of deal made? And to me, maybe, but what would be okay? So for the pilots of these UFOs, like, what would be the advantage for them when they can just do it anyway? Like, they can just abduct people anyway. Like, why reach an agreement at all unless the whole thing was a farce, just to keep the government compliant in the secret? Maybe the aliens, or the extra dimensional beings or whatever, maybe they either weren't ready to be public yet, or maybe they couldn't because not enough of the veil had been released yet. I've got this theory that once the veil is removed, once I'm a preacher guy, and I believe you are too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think once that event happens, the veil's gone.
I agree.
I think that's the Holy Spirit at work in the church. I think that's gone, and these things will be able to fully manifest.
I agree.
And I think the more time goes by, it's almost like a gradual thing, because they seem to be manifesting more and more and more, but still not to the point where it's this big public, they're all over the world now kind of thing. And I'm not saying that won't happen until after the rapture. I don't know. That could happen today. I have no idea. But I think that at the time in the 40s, there was clearly a plan going on here. And I think Roswell was one step in that plan.
Yes.
From these beings. And so if there was some kind of deal made with Eisenhower, I think the only advantage for them would have been like, we don't want this public yet because we either can't manifest or we're not ready to just yet because we have other things in plan over the next few decades or whatever. I think that would be the only reason, because otherwise it just didn't happen, because it could be that. It could be that there wasn't any deal and the government has no idea what they're messing with and has no idea what's messing with us. And to me, that seems likely too, because again, if you're a part of this just extraordinary angelic technology, if you're of that faction, you don't need permission from human beings to do anything. You can just do it. There's nothing we can really do to stop it apart from the blood of Jesus Christ, of course. And maybe that's why they wanted to keep it secret for so long, because, Christianity was a lot bigger decades ago than it is now. Maybe too many people would have seen this as demonic, and they didn't have enough time to roll out the alien lie yet. So there's a bunch of different ways to look at that and a bunch of different ways that it could have played out. So that's just a few. So I don't know for sure, but it's just interesting to me that there would have been a deal made when they really shouldn't have had to do that, because they could just do whatever they want, it seems like.
I'm going to pick that up in our next segment, part two in this, because the question I have for you, and I'll give you time to think about it before we sign off on part one. You'll want to check part two out tomorrow, folks. But there seems to be a quid pro quo, even in the book of Enoch. They just, there seems to be lines that they can't cross. This, like the old vampire, as Vicky Joy Anderson would say, the old vampire lord, hey, you can't come in here until we give you permission, type of thing. Yep. There's a saying I came up with a number of years ago: we go up, they come down; we go up, they show up, which ties into the rapture theory. So we'll pick this up again tomorrow. Thanks so much for coming on the record. Folks, you can check out all of our books, all of our films, by going to lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net. Josh, tell us how we can get a hold of all your great work.
Absolutely. So the best place to go still, because for those who aren't familiar, I was at Skywatch TV for a long time. I'm now working at IGBY International, which is the Zach Drew show. And it wasn't anything weird. Me and Tom Horn are still great friends. He's still publishing all my books. So if people want to get my books or movies, still the best place to go is skywatchtvstore.com. And then I'll just add on to that, check out the Zach Drew show, because we talk about stuff like this. We actually just had Timothy Alberino on for a 2-part episode too. So we talk about this kind of stuff, and we're rolling out some pretty big things in the next year that I think people will be excited
Congratulations on your new position. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Folks, there is a supernatural world that surrounds us, and sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. Things are heating up. We'll be back tomorrow with part 2 with Josh Peck. Thanks so much for watching.